Another project, 200 Elite Ducati, and we're starting with the engine rebuild. So welcome to another video here at Back to Classics. Today we're going to have a look at the 1960 Ducati 200 Elite. And this is what we call a narrow case engine. So that's the first incarnation of the Ducati single overhead cam engine. This being a 200cc, but still with the 4-speed gearbox. Now this bike we need to do some work on. As we're going to explain in a future video, but we actually have another one of these engines came in for a complete engine rebuild, and that I'm going to show you right now. So we're a step further with the disassembly. As you can see, we removed the outer covers, the carburetor, which will be further disassembled later on, the clutch that has to be inspected but seems to be in a good condition. And now we move to the first major problem that we found on this engine, and that is, as is often the case on these 4-speed narrow case engines, is the starting mechanism. So here's where the problem is. As you can see, when I turn the kickstart shaft, that works all fine. You see the output shaft of the gearbox moving. That's where the clutch is attached to. But now when I remove this, you see right here broken off piece of aluminium, which we need to repair. And on the other gear, the drive gear, you can see where the actual problem comes from, where it is completely worn. You see the gears? So that needs to be replaced, and that needs to be repaired. So going further with the disassembly and inspection of our 200 Elite project, we have now further disassembled the cylinder head, as you can see here. And again, we found some issues with this. First up was the bush of the upper bevel gear. As you can see here, that slides in a little bit too easy, as this should be, well, with a press fitment inside that head, and I can remove it by hand. Now, luckily we have a brand new bush in stock, and that is going to do the trick, because that will have to be pressed in there as it should be. Now, there has been some repairs to this. Hope you can see it, but you can see here some people have been, well, jamming that old bush in place without any success, that as well, but at least we can improve on that with the new bush. But going further, as you can see here, we found the valve rockers to be problematic. Again, I hope you can see this while I get this on camera, is that both the side, that the lobe that goes over the camshaft has some damage, but also the adjustment screw on the valve stem has a lot of damage, and that is actually on both the inlet and the exhaust. This one a little bit less so, but still on that side you can see a lot of wear on that adjustment screw. So that needs to be replaced. And going further, while we remove the head from this tool, going further you can see there is some damage on the inside of the combustion chamber here, and on the other side as well. So perhaps, or presumably, there has been some parts going in there that should not have been there. And going further to the valve guides and seats, we have here the exhaust valve. When I put that in the guide, you can wiggle it back and forth, clearly showing that the valve guide has been worn. And a little less so on the inlet side, but still not the way we want to see it. So valve guides need to be replaced as well. And then we go to the valve seats, and these are not perfect either. These are not the originals, they have been replaced at some point. Ducati always used bronze or aluminium bronze for their valve guides. These are steel, obviously. Ones we don't really like, but we're going to replace these as well. So a lot of parts to be replaced, a lot of repairs to be done to that cylinder head, which has had quite a hard life, I guess. So next up, as we move along, is to take this apart a little bit further, and I'm sure we'll find some other things to address. Yeah, well, in general, this is quite a problematic engine in the sense that we found some serious issues, obviously with the starting mechanism, with the cylinder head, and these things that we really need to address. But first we are going to further disassemble the engine, so we have all the parts laid out on the workbench that we can inspect and well, make our plan as we carry along with the engine. Okay, so we're removing the cylinder and piston right now. So let's see what we can find here. Okay, now we have cleared out the gudgeon pin and circlip, so that needs to be removed first. There we go. That's the circlip, which means that the gudgeon pin, let's remove this one too. that needs a slight push. There we have it. So what we immediately see is that this is the original piston probably, with the extra lower oil scraping ring. But let's remove this further from the cylinder. Remove the old gasket because that's not going to be reused. And now I immediately see an issue with the cylinder lining, as there is a damaged piece here. Seems to be a whole piece missing, which begs the question where that has gone. Piston rings seem to be okay. But next job is to have this, to get this all measured up and see what the clearance is on this piston. Here's another one. So quite some damage on the cylinder lining. Piston looks to be fine, but well, given the damage to the liner, we'll probably have to replace it anyway. But let's see what the measurement is, and we can tell more. So I'm now going to measure the piston and the cylinder to see what clearance they have. And it has to be measured within a hundredth of a millimeter. So I've prepared my measuring devices, and I'm going to start with the piston. 23, 5, it's 22 undersize. Okay, so now for the cylinder. And that is, 20. So we've measured the piston and the cylinder. And the piston I've measured at 66.75 millimeters. And the cylinder at 67.2 millimeters, giving a clearance of 0.35 millimeters, which is way too big. So that means the cylinder is moving, the piston is moving inside the cylinder in a much too bigger space. So that, plus given the damage that we found on the cylinder lining, well, that suggests that we need to place an oversized piston, and this one cannot be used anymore. That means that we're going to try to reuse that cylinder lining, even though it has the damage, but we can make sure that it is bored out and honed to the new size, removing that damage anyway. So that's going to be the plan. So now we're going to get the distribution disassembled. Let's first remove the O-ring inside of here. There we go. That obviously we're going to replace. And now we can take the lower bevel support off. Which is of course stuck. Well, that needs a little bit more convincing, I'm afraid. So we're nearly done with the disassembly of the 200 Elite engine. Cases have been split, gearbox removed, crankshaft, well obviously the rest we've talked about already. So now for the final measurements we're going to have a closer look at the crankshaft and the gearbox, and then we are going to make our final plans and proposal as to how we're going to bring this engine back to its former glory. It's quite a lot off its former glory, to be honest. It has a hard life. So we've reached the end of this assembly process of the Ducati 200 Elite engine. And well, we have drawn up this document, an engine assessment, detailing everything there is to know about this engine, really, and how we think we should go about to make this engine fresh and clean and make it last for another 30-40 years. So let's go over the little details and see what our client can expect from us. So first up, the cylinder head. And well, although some parts, many parts are just fine, in fact, or can be reused in the rebuild, some items need some attention, and one of those is the cylinder head. We talked this before, but cylinder head has some damage inside the combustion chamber. As you can see here, at some point in its life there was some loose item going about the combustion chamber, damaging all the dents and things you can see here, and that is in fact, well, problematic because it is very hard to repair this kind of damage. We can weld, of course, aluminium is to be welded, but it's the amount of heat that's going into the engine when welding is problematic, can cause cracks and other issues, and as well the machining after the welding is going to be tough as well, because there's a dome-shaped hemispherical combustion chamber that needs to be dressed after welding. So this is going to be, well, a big issue. Something that this engine might not be worth to address fully, in fact. So what we suggest to do here is just to get the surface as clean as possible without removing all of the damage. Not that it's so much of a problem, because this is a 200cc Elite engine going into an Elite bike, obviously. It's not used for racing or other high performance demands are there. So these holes that you can see inside the combustion chamber, they will fill up with coal quite rapidly, and that will form a smooth surface anyway. That said, we also discussed with our client the possibility to source a completely other head instead of using this one. Which is not an easy job, because these are not easily found anywhere. It's not like we can call anyone to say, hey, I would like a new 200 Elite cylinder head, because they're not about anymore. So something to discuss, something to repair, although it cannot be repaired 100%. Moving further, in what we found inside the cylinder head were the valve rockers, and as you can see here, the surface on the valve rockers, this is the cam lobe that goes over, sorry, the lobe over the rockers that goes over the camshaft, and that is worn quite badly on both, actually, inlet and exhaust. Going further, also, because these are the earlier type valve rockers that use a screw to adjust the valve tapper clearance. The screws on this side, which is hit down on the valve, have been worn as well, quite badly. And these screws we cannot get anymore. So if we were to weld this up and grind it down and re-chrome, hard chrome, and then grind it again, it will be a quite expensive set of valve rockers, where we can also supply completely new ones from stock, albeit that they have a slightly different design, where instead of using these type of adjustment screws, we use the adjustment shims. So not original for a 200 Elite, but still it would make sense to replace these with completely new items that'll do the job just fine. So moving on, these are worn, but we'll have to see about these. The camshaft itself is actually in quite a good condition. No big damage on the surface of the lobes, and this is something that we certainly can use in the rebuild. And the same goes for the bevel gear, which is also just fine, apart from the bush that we already discussed, because there's bearing bush that's still fitted on the upper bevel shaft, is not fitting very good inside the housing that is made for that inside the head. So that about the cylinder head. Moving on to the carburetor. This is the original fitted UB24BS carburetor. Still in very good condition, complete and well, certainly reusable in the rebuild. Apart from some minor parts that we need replacing, like gaskets and seals and maybe a jet here or there, nothing serious going on. We have already prepared the main body and the float chamber for painting, because these early type Delortos were painted silver. But these are blasted already and good to go to the paint shop before we can finally assemble the complete carburetor again. Going further, we find the cylinder and piston. Well, we have already measured everything up. I made a slight calculation error, not so much a measuring error, but a calculation error. The clearance between the cylinder and the piston that you see here is 0.45 millimeters, which is way too much. So the conclusion still is the same. We cannot use this piston inside this cylinder. Now, we also talked about the damage that we found inside the cylinder. Hard to see probably, but here you can probably see the damage. And this is still the 67.0, be it nominal size, piston fitted. So, well, we have a 68.0 millimeter piston in stock that we can certainly use, in which case we can bore and hone this cylinder out to 68 millimeter in diameter in order to fit the new piston. So that is what we propose with this. Obviously, the head that you saw earlier and the cylinder, along with the crankcases, will be aqua blasted to be fresh and clean again. So going over our document further, we see that the distribution, the primary drive, the oil pump, the gear change, the gearbox itself is all in pretty good condition and can be reused in the process. But another big issue with this engine is what we talked about before, the starting mechanism. And as you can see here, again, this is the drive gear for the starting mechanism, which is completely worn. And well, we meanwhile decided to have this, well, we're going to try to get this remade. So we get fresh new gears in stock for this engine and for future projects as well. So we will draw this up in 3D using SolidWorks, our 3D software. And that is going to be done soon, so we can, well, get this the starting mechanism fresh and clean with new parts, which are, well, definitely needed in this case. The crankshaft, as you can see here, has been pressed apart, and well, we found some issues with that as well. The clearance on the big end bearing is too big; it cannot be used again, so it needs a new big end bearing and new conrod. But also, these have been damaged quite badly by someone doing a botched job in the past. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see here the surface here, which should have been smooth, is knurled. Probably from someone trying to get a better fitment on the main bearings, but that should really not be done in this way. In fact, we can get a very hard reading when we try to measure the alignment, but it was out of line quite badly. And what we often find on these early crankshafts is that the outer shaft on these crankshaft webs are not true to the there's not an exactly 90-degree angle what we're looking for. So these are problematic. Not to say that it is completely unusable, but we did find this in our stock, which is another 200cc crankshaft, which is much better in line. And although it may not look quite beautiful, we can do a better job using this one instead, we feel. This one also needs a new conrod and big end bearing, but the crankshaft webs are in a much better condition. So we suggest to use this instead of the old crankshaft that came out of this engine. And then finally, the crankcases. We have already discussed the issue we found with the starter mechanism and the broken out piece here. That is, well, it's a weld and machine job, but we feel confident about that. But we also found another issue on the other crankshaft half, and that is right here, which is where the clutch push rod goes inside. And again, hard to see, but there is quite some material missing around here. You can see here just the leftover bit left. What this does is, in fact, I can show you the other side, which may be a bit more clear. You see this hole here is not the way it should be. There's a whole piece of aluminium missing. And what this does is there's this bearing from the gearbox main shaft fitted there, and a seal on the other side preventing the oil coming out because there is a push rod going in there. And that seal is very hard to fit without any material to hold it. So again, here we need to weld and machine this piece to get it back in order. So that concludes the disassembly phase of this project. And well, we have drawn up a document detailing all there is to do on the rebuild of this engine, as you have seen in this video as well. And well, we're now going to discuss this with our client, the owner of this engine, to see how we will approach the rebuild further. In the end, I'm sure we'll end up with a very nicely rebuilt and all good to go engine for our client to fit it inside his 200 Elite Ducati motorcycle and have it ready to go for another many decades. So this also concludes this video episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Toodle-dokie, and see you next time.